Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was trained by Shang as the master of martial arts. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The wind on the rooftop was a liar. It whispered of freedom, of flight, of possibilities as it whipped past the ears and tugged at the dark green strands of Izuku Midoriya's hair. It was the same wind that heroes rode, the same air they cleaved through on their way to save the day. For Izuku, it was just cold, a harsh and empty reminder of the gravity that held him firmly, uselessly, to the ground. All might was gone. The words lingered, heavier than the number one hero's muscle form, more crushing than any villain's blow. It's not bad to dream. But you have to be realistic, kid. Realistic. The single word was a death sentence. For 14 years, Izuku had lived in a world of vibrant color, of impossible feats, and dazzling quirks. His reality had been one of hope, of meticulous analysis scribbled into notebooks until the pages were cramped with frantic genius. He believed that if he just studied enough, if he just wanted it enough, if he was just good enough, the universe would relent and grant him the one thing he craved, the power to save people with a smile. Now, the color had bled from the world. The city below was a muted watercolor of grays and browns. The once inspiring skyline was just a collection of jagged concrete teeth. Realistic. The word echoed in the hollow space where his heart used to be. He trudged down the stairwell of the building, each step a leaden weight. His hand, as if with a mind of its own, clutched the strap of his yellow backpack. Inside, nestled amongst his textbooks, was Hero Analysis for the Future, Volume 13. It was singed at the edges and still damp from the sludge villain and the subsequent dip in the koi pond. He could feel the pulpy, ruined texture of the pages even through the fabric of the bag. A funeral shroud for a dead dream. The walk home was a blur of self-inflicted torture. A billboard showcasing the debut of a new hero with some kind of light manipulation quirk felt like a personal insult. The chatter of kids his age, excitedly discussing the latest hero merchandise, was like sandpaper on his raw nerves. He was an alien, a ghost haunting a world he desperately wanted to be a part of but was fundamentally incompatible with. He was quirkless. A broken toy in a world of wonders. He remembered Bakugo's face, contorted in a sneer of rage and confusion. "You're worse than the rest of these damn rejects, you quirkless wannabe." For the first time, Izuku found himself thinking that maybe, just maybe, Kaken was right. What was he doing? Who was he trying to fool? He was a liability. He'd almost gotten All Might killed today, distracting him, clinging to him like a pathetic parasite. He took a shortcut, a route he hadn't used in years. It was a narrow, winding back alley that snaked between a dilapidated pachinko parlor and a grimy apartment complex. The air grew thick with the stench of stale beer and overflowing dumpsters. A single flickering neon sign from a ramen shop at the far end cast long, dancing shadows that looked like grasping claws. He just wanted to be home. He wanted to curl up in his All Might-themed bedroom, a monument to his own foolishness, and disappear. That's when he heard it. A sharp cry of fear, followed by a low, guttural laugh. Izuku froze. His blood ran cold, a familiar yet unwelcome sensation. Peeking around the corner of a large, rusted dumpster, he saw the scene unfold. Two men, burly and dressed in worn-out street clothes, had cornered a young couple. The woman was clutching her purse, her eyes wide with terror. The man stood protectively in front of her, though his trembling knees betrayed his bravado. "Just give us the bag and your wallets, and we'll be on our way," the first thug grunted. His knuckles were unnaturally large, almost like they were wrapped in dull, gray metal. A minor strength enhancement quirk, Izuku's mind catalogued automatically, a pathetic twitch of a dying habit. "Oh, leave us alone," the young man stammered. The second thug, a lanky man with a cruel smirk, cracked his own knuckles. "We're not asking." "Don't," a voice in Izuku's head, a voice that sounded suspiciously like All Might, screamed at him. "You can't do anything. You're quirkless. Call the police. Find a hero. Be realistic." He reached for his phone, his fingers fumbling with the zipper of his pocket. But his eyes were glued to the scene. The first thug shoved the young man, who stumbled back into his girlfriend. She let out another terrified squeak. And in that moment, something inside Izuku snapped. It wasn't a conscious decision. It wasn't a plan. It was a primal, undeniable impulse that bypassed every rational thought, every single one of All Might's soul-crushing words. It was the same instinct that had sent him running towards the sludge villain to save Kaken. It was the core of his being, the one thing that even the symbol of peace couldn't extinguish, the desperate, stupid, unbreakable need to help. His body moved before his brain could protest. With a choked, silent sob of frustration at his own foolishness, Izuku swung his yellow backpack off his shoulder. He gripped it with both hands, his knuckles white, and with a guttural yell that was more fear than fury, he hurled it with all his might. The bag spun through the air, a pathetic yellow blur against the grimy brickwork. It wasn't a hero's projectile. It didn't crackle with energy or explode on impact. It was a school bag, heavy with books and shattered dreams, and it slapped against the bigger thug's shoulder with a dull, unsatisfying thud. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Even the flickering neon sign seemed to hold its breath. The two thugs and the terrified couple all turned to stare at the source of the interruption, a scrawny, green-haired middle schooler, trembling from head to toe, his face a mask of wide-eyed horror at what he had just done. The lanky thug was the first to break the silence, a slow, incredulous laugh bubbling from his chest. "What the hell was that? You trying to kill us with homework, kid?" The burly thug rubbed his shoulder, his expression shifting from surprise to pure, unadulterated rage. The metallic sheen on his knuckles seemed to grow brighter. "You've got a death wish, you little freak." He started towards Izuku, each heavy footstep echoing like a drumbeat of doom in the narrow alley. Izuku's legs were locked in place, his body refusing to obey the frantic signals from his brain to run. All he could see were those metal-laced fists, and all he could hear was All Might's voice. "You're not a hero. You're a liability." He was going to die. Or worse, he was going to be beaten so badly he'd wish he was dead. And for what? For a reckless, pointless gesture that had accomplished nothing but drawing the villain's attention to himself. The couple was still trapped. He hadn't saved anyone. He had just added himself to the list of victims. The thug loomed over him, a mountain of muscle and menace. He drew back his fist, a cruel grin spreading across his face. "Let me teach you a lesson about minding your own business." Izuku squeezed his eyes shut, a pathetic whimper escaping his lips. He braced for the impact, for the searing pain of bone breaking against metal-hardened knuckles, for the final, humiliating confirmation of his own uselessness. The impact never came. Instead, there was a sound. A soft, almost imperceptible whisper of movement, like silk sliding over stone. Then, a sharp, crisp thwack, like a bamboo cane striking a side of beef. Izuku's eyes snapped open. The world seemed to have tilted on its axis. The burly thug was no longer standing over him. He was on his knees, his face contorted in a mask of shock pain, his right arm bent at an angle that was sickeningly wrong. He was clutching his elbow, a choked groan rattling in his chest. Standing between Izuku and the thug was a man. He hadn't been there a second ago. He seemed to have materialized from the shadows themselves. He was of average height, with a lean, athletic build that was hidden but not disguised by a simple, well-tailored jacket and dark pants. His face was calm, his dark eyes focused and impossibly serene, as if he were observing a chess match rather than standing in a filthy alley. The lanky thug stared, his jaw hanging open. "Where did you?" He didn't get to finish his question. The newcomer moved. It wasn't a blur of superhuman speed like All Might. It was something else entirely. It was a flow, an undeniable and unstoppable current of motion. He took a single step, closing the distance between them in an instant. The thug swung a wild, panicked punch. The man didn't block it. He didn't even seem to acknowledge it as a threat. His hand came up, not to stop the fist, but to gently guide it, redirecting the clumsy momentum. With his other hand, he performed a series of movements so fast Izuku's analytical brain couldn't even begin to process them. A finger jab to the throat, just enough to make the thug gag. A palm heel strike to the solar plexus that forced all the air from his lungs in a wheezing gasp. A low, sweeping kick that targeted the back of the thug's knee, buckling his leg and sending him crumpling to the pavement. It was over in less than 3 seconds. Not a single wasted motion. No flashy energy blasts, no earth-shattering punches. It was quiet, efficient, and utterly devastating. It was like watching a master calligrapher paint a masterpiece with violence as his ink. The alley fell silent once more, the only sounds the pained groans of the two thugs and the frantic, shallow breathing of the rescued couple. The man straightened his jacket, the fabric falling perfectly back into place. He gave the couple a brief, reassuring nod. You should go. The police have been alerted. The couple, stammering their thanks, scrambled past the groaning thugs and fled the alley without a second glance. Now, it was just Izuku and the stranger, surrounded by the detritus of the brief, one-sided battle. The man turned, and for the first time, his calm, dark eyes focused entirely on Izuku. It was a gaze unlike any he had ever experienced. It wasn't the pitying look he got from his teachers, nor the contemptuous glare from Bakugo, nor even the sorrowful concern from his mother. This man's gaze was discerning. It was like he was looking past Izuku's trembling limbs and tear-streaked face, peering directly into his soul. You are shaking, the man stated simply. His voice was calm and even, with a faint accent Izuku couldn't quite place. Izuku looked down at his hands. They were trembling so violently it was a miracle he was still standing. A wave of shame washed over him. He had been useless, terrified, and now he was falling apart in front of the person who had actually saved the day. I am sorry, Izuku stammered, his voice cracking. I didn't. My body moved on its own? The man finished, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Izuku's head snapped up, his eyes wide with shock. How did you? The man took a step closer. He gestured to the incapacitated thugs. They had a quirk. You have none. I felt no energy from you, no potential waiting to be unlocked. Yet you threw yourself into a fight you were guaranteed to lose. A fight that was not yours. Why? The question was direct, stripping away all pretense. Why? All Might had asked him that too. And Izuku had the same answer now as he did then, but this time it felt different. It wasn't an excuse offered to a god. It was a simple statement of fact offered to a man who seemed to understand the world on a different level. I don't know, Izuku whispered, the words raw and honest. I saw they were in trouble, and I couldn't just stand there. I had to do something. He looked down at his worthless, trembling hands. Even if it was stupid. Even if it was useless. The man was silent for a long moment, his gaze unwavering. Izuku felt as though his entire life, every hope and every failure, was being weighed and measured. He expected the man to scoff, to tell him he was a fool and to leave heroics to the heroes. He expected another dose of reality. Instead, the man said, it was not useless. It was reckless. It was untrained. But it was not useless. He paused, his eyes drifting to the yellow backpack lying in the grime a few feet away. You bought them time. You created a distraction. You shifted the balance of the encounter, however slightly. Your action had a purpose, even if your body lacked the skill to see it through. Izuku stared at him, bewildered. No one had ever described his impulsive actions as anything other than a problem. A liability. A symptom of his own foolish delusions. The world, the man continued, his voice taking on a didactic tone, is obsessed with the lottery of birth. They call it quirks. A power granted by chance, honed through repetition. For most, it is the beginning and the end of their strength. They believe that what you are born with dictates what you can become. He took another step, standing directly in front of Izuku now. He was not tall or overwhelmingly muscular like All Might, yet he possessed an aura of such profound stillness and control that he seemed to fill the entire alley. They are wrong. A quirk is a tool. A powerful one, yes. But a hammer is useless in the hands of someone who does not know how to build. True power is not a gift you are born with. It is forged. It is built, piece by piece, through sweat and pain and discipline. It is a mountain you must learn to climb, step by agonizing step, with your own two hands. The man's eyes seemed to burn with a quiet intensity. He saw the flicker of hope in Izuku's gaze, the desperate ember that had refused to be extinguished. You have the heart of a warrior, he said, the words landing with a weight that shook Izuku to his very core. But the body of a student. Your spirit is a raging fire, but your vessel is an unbaked clay pot, threatening to crack under the strain. He extended a hand, not to help Izuku up, but as a gesture of invitation. It was a strong hand, with calluses on the knuckles and a sense of immense, controlled power resting within it. My name is Shang-Chi, and I can teach you how to fire the clay. I can teach you how to temper the steel of your own body. I can teach you how to climb that mountain. He lowered his hand. The path I offer is not an easy one. It will demand more from you than you believe you have to give. It will break you down to your very foundation before it builds you back up. But if you walk it, you will never be powerless again. Izuku's mind reeled. It was impossible. It was a dream. After the worst day of his life, after having his entire world dismantled by his greatest idol, here was a stranger offering him, what? Not a quirk, not a magic solution. He was offering a chance. A path paved with hardship, but a path nonetheless. It was a flickering candle in the crushing darkness. He looked at the two defeated thugs, who had been taken down without any power he could name. He looked at the man, Shang-Chi, whose quiet confidence was more impressive than any boastful hero he'd ever seen, and he looked inward, at the hollow, aching void within himself. He had nothing left to lose. His dream was dead, All Might himself had declared it so. But maybe this was a different dream, or maybe, just maybe, it was a different way to make the old one real. Tears welled in Izuku's eyes, but for the first time that day, they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of desperate, fragile hope. He wiped them away with the back of his hand and stood up a little straighter. His voice was still shaky, but it held a new resolve, a flicker of the fire Shang-Chi had seen. Yes, Izuku said, the single word carrying the weight of his entire shattered world. Please! Teach me! A rare, faint smile touched the corner of Shang-Chi's lips. It was not a wide, beaming smile like All Might's. It was a small, knowing expression of approval. A master accepting a new student. Good, he said. He retrieved Izuku's backpack, dusting it off with a flick of his wrist before handing it back. Your training begins tomorrow. Where? When? Izuku asked, his mind already racing. Shang-Chi's gaze drifted towards the horizon, where the last vestiges of daylight were being swallowed by the twilight. Be at the Municipal Beach Park. The part that is covered in trash. He turned his gaze back to Izuku, his expression serious once more. Before the sun rises. And with that, he turned and melted back into the shadows from whence he came, leaving Izuku alone in the alley, the groans of the thugs a distant memory. He clutched his backpack to his chest, the ruined notebook inside no longer feeling like a tombstone, but like the first, discarded draft of a brand new story. The emptiness inside him was still there, but it was no longer a void. It was a space waiting to be filled. For the first time since he'd stood on that rooftop, Izuku Midoriya took a full, deep breath. The air still felt cold, but it no longer felt empty. It felt like a beginning. The sun had not yet begun its ascent. The sky was a deep, bruised purple, the stars still clinging to their posts like defiant diamonds on black velvet. A cold, salty wind swept in from the sea, carrying with it the stench of rust, decay, and forgotten things. This was the part of Municipal Beach Park that the city had long since abandoned, a graveyard of consumerism where refrigerators, cars, and mountains of scrap metal lay piled like the bones of metallic leviathans, and in the middle of it all stood Izuku Midoriya, shivering. It was partly from the pre-dawn chill, but mostly from a nervous, electric anticipation that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. He had arrived 20 minutes early, his yellow backpack clutched tight, a fresh, unopened notebook and a pen in his pocket. He was ready to learn, to analyze, to deconstruct the genius he had witnessed in the alley. He expected drills, exercises, perhaps a lecture on technique he could furiously scribble down. Shang-Chi, who had been waiting for him seated in a meditative lotus position atop a rusted-out washing machine, simply opened his eyes as Izuku approached. He didn't seem to feel the cold. He was a statue of perfect stillness amidst the chaos of the junkyard. You are early, Shang-Chi said. His voice was as calm and clear as the air before a storm. Why, yes, sir. Master Shang. Izuku bowed so deeply his forehead nearly touched his knees. I didn't want to be late. I'm ready to learn. I brought a notebook to take notes on stances and styles and put it away, Shang-Chi interrupted, not unkindly, but with an air of absolute finality. He gracefully unfolded himself from his seated position, landing on the sand with a sound so soft it was barely audible. The lessons I teach you today will not be written in a book. They will be written on your bones, in your muscles, and upon your spirit. Your mind is a flurry of analysis. It is a strength, but it is also a cage. For now, you must learn to be empty. Izuku, flustered, quickly stuffed the notebook back into his bag. Empty? He didn't know how to be empty. His mind was a perpetual motion machine of thoughts and theories. Shang-Chi gestured to a relatively clear patch of sand. Your first lesson. The horse stance. Ma-bu. He moved, and his body settled into a position of impossible stability. His feet were planted wide, his knees bent as if he were sitting on an invisible chair, his back perfectly straight, his fists held tight at his waist. He looked as if he had grown directly from the earth, as immovable as one of the scrap metal mountains behind him. This is the foundation, Shang-Chi explained. From here, all power is born. It is the root from which the martial artist grows. Assume the position. Izuku tried to mimic him. His feet were too close together. His back was hunched. His knees wobbled. Lower, Shang-Chi commanded. Your thighs should be parallel to the ground. Your back, a straight line from your tailbone to the crown of your head. Imagine you are holding a priceless Ming vase on your head. Do not let it fall. Izuku gritted his teeth and forced his body lower. An immediate, searing burn ignited in his thighs. His legs, used to little more than running to catch a train, began to tremble almost immediately. Good, Shang-Chi said, walking a slow circle around him. Now hold it. For how long? Izuku gasped, sweat already beading on his forehead. Until I tell you to stop. The first minute was agony. The second was a new dimension of pain he hadn't known existed. The muscles in his legs screamed, then roared, then began to send frantic, panic signals to his brain, begging him to give up, to stand, to do anything but this. His entire body shook. He could feel his form wavering, his back starting to curve. You are thinking about the pain, Shang-Chi's voice cut through his internal haze. Do not. The pain is a distraction. A liar. It tells you that you are weak, that you are at your limit. Your true limit is far beyond what the pain tells you. Focus on your breath. In through the nose, deep into your belly. Out through the mouth, slow and controlled. Your breath is your anchor. Find it. Izuku tried. He gasped in a ragged breath, then let it out in a shuddering sigh. The pain didn't go away, but for a split second, his focus shifted. He could feel the air filling his lungs, the slight expansion of his abdomen. He did it again. And again. The burning in his legs was still there, a roaring inferno, but his trembling lessened ever so slightly. He held the stance for what felt like an eternity. The sun began to bleed orange and pink across the horizon, casting long shadows that stretched from the junk piles like accusing fingers. Finally, just as Izuku felt his legs were about to buckle and dump him unceremoniously onto the sand, Shang-Chi spoke. You may stand. Izuku collapsed. He didn't stand. He fell forward onto his hands and knees, his legs giving out completely. He was panting, his entire body drenched in sweat, his thighs feeling like jelly. That was the first 10 minutes, Shang-Chi stated unfazed. We have the rest of the day. And then tomorrow. And the day after that. And so it began. The first 3 months were a crucible of deconstruction. Every day before school, and every evening after, Izuku was pushed to the absolute brink of his physical and mental endurance. Shang-Chi was relentless in breaking down the vessel of the boy known as Izuku Midoriya. The horse stance was a daily ritual, a torment that slowly, almost imperceptibly, forged a foundation of raw strength in his legs and core. He learned other stances, the swiftness of the dragon, the balance of the crane, the ferocity of the tiger, each one torturing a new set of muscles, demanding a new level of control. He learned to fall. Shang-Chi would walk by and, without warning, sweep his legs out from under him. The first dozen times, Izuku crashed onto the sand with painful, clumsy thuds. Then, Shang-Chi taught him how to roll, how to absorb the impact, how to turn a potentially injurious fall into a fluid movement that brought him back to his feet. A hero will spend more time getting knocked down than standing tall, Shang-Chi told him as Izuku spat sand from his mouth. The fall is not the failure. The failure is not knowing how to get back up. He learned to punch. He spent an entire week doing nothing but standing before a thick wooden post wrapped in rope, practicing a single, basic straight punch. His knuckles bled. His shoulders ached. Shang-Chi would constantly correct him, adjusting the angle of his hip, the pivot of his foot, the snap of his wrist. No, Shang-Chi would say, his voice sharp but patient. He placed a hand on Izuku's hip and another on his shoulder. The power is not in your arm. Your arm is a conduit, nothing more. The power comes from the earth. Feel it. Draw it up through the soles of your feet, let it travel through your legs, twist it in your hips, channel it up your spine, and only then, at the very last instant, release it through your fist. You are not pushing. You are exploding. Izuku, used to thinking of power as a dazzling, explosive quirk, struggled with the concept. But he tried, over and over, until the motion became second nature. He began to feel the kinetic chain, the elegant physics of a perfectly thrown punch. During a water break one afternoon, as Izuku nursed his bruised hands, he finally asked the question that had been burning in his mind. Master Shang, what is this strength? How did you do what you did in the alley? Is it chi? Shang-Chi took a seat on an old tire, his posture perfect even at rest. In a way. The world you know is filled with rivers of power you call quirks. They are flashy, loud, and powerful. Some are raging rapids, some are deep and slow. But beneath them all, in every living thing, quirked or quirkless, flows the true river. The source. That is chi or chi. The energy of life itself. He picked up a small, smooth stone from the sand. A quirk is like a dam being opened. A huge, sudden release of power. It is impressive, but it is often uncontrolled, and it eventually runs dry until it can be released again. Chi is the river itself. It is always flowing. It is quiet, subtle, but relentless. With enough time, it can wear down mountains. He looked directly at Izuku, his gaze piercing. You, Izuku Midoriya, have a gift you do not recognize. You have no quirk. There is no other powerful tributary diverting the flow of your river. Your potential is pure. Uncluttered. If you can learn to feel your river, to guide its current, you will find a power that no one can ever take away from you. A power that is entirely, and truly your own. The words resonated deep within Izuku. A gift. His quirklessness, the source of all his pain and ridicule, reframed as potential. It was the most profound thing anyone had ever said to him. The key, Shang-Chi explained, was meditation. Every training session began and ended with it. For Izuku, whose mind was a chaotic symphony of anxiety and analysis, it was the hardest training of all. Sitting still, trying to empty his mind, felt like trying to hold back the ocean with a sieve. Do not try to stop the thoughts, Shang-Chi guided him. You cannot. Let them come. Observe them as if they are clouds passing in the sky. Do not cling to them. Do not judge them. Just let them pass, and always return to your breath. It is the center. Your anchor in the storm of your own mind. For weeks, it was fruitless. But then, one evening, as the waves crashed a rhythmic cadence against the shore, something happened. As he sat, focusing on his breath, a new sensation emerged. It was a faint warmth, a subtle tingle that started deep in his belly and spread outwards through his limbs. It was like feeling the circulation of his own blood, but deeper, more fundamental. He wasn't imagining it. His eyes shot open. Master! I think I felt it. Shang-Chi, meditating opposite him, simply nodded. Good. You have taken the first step onto a path that has no end. Now do it again. The next few months marked a shift from deconstruction to reconstruction. The grueling conditioning continued, but now it was integrated with technique. Izuku began to learn katas, the choreographed forms of martial arts. At first, they were just a sequence of moves to memorize. But as he practiced them, hundreds, then thousands of times, he began to feel the flow, the poetry in the motion. A block flowed into a strike, which flowed into a kick, which flowed into a new stance. It was a language spoken by the body. His muttering habit, his frantic analysis of everything around him, became a target of Shang-Chi's training. During sparring sessions, which consisted of Izuku trying and failing to land a single touch on his master, Shang-Chi would exploit this weakness mercilessly. "You are trying to predict my next move," Shang-Chi said, effortlessly redirecting a clumsy punch with a flick of his wrist that sent Izuku stumbling. "You are running simulations in your head. He will use a crane technique to counter my lunge, so I should feint and..." "Stop. Your mind is too slow. By the time you have finished the thought, the fight is over." Izuku, sprawled on the sand, looked up in frustration. "But, analysis is all I have. It's how I understand things." "Then you must learn to analyze with your entire body, not just your brain," Shang-Chi countered. "Feel the shift in my weight. Sense the intention in my shoulders. Listen to the sound of my feet on the sand. Your instincts, honed by thousands of repetitions, will know what to do long before your conscious mind can form a plan. Stop thinking, Izuku, and start feeling." To break the habit, Shang-Chi made him spar blindfolded, forcing him to rely on hearing and the subtle vibrations in the ground. He made him practice his forms on the treacherous, uneven surfaces of the junk piles, demanding perfect balance and awareness. The true turning point came around the 7th month. They were sparring, the setting sun painting the sky in fiery colors. Izuku was moving on instinct, his body a blur of blocks and evasions. Shang-Chi was a phantom, his movements fluid and unpredictable. He launched a swift jab towards Izuku's chest. In the past, Izuku would have tried to block it head-on, or dodged backward, or overanalyzed it. This time, he did none of those things. Without thinking, his body remembered the lessons. He didn't retreat. He advanced, stepping into the attack. His left hand came up, not to block, but to gently cup Shang-Chi's elbow. His right hand became a knife edge, striking the cluster of nerves on his master's inner forearm. It wasn't a powerful blow. It was precise. Shang-Chi's arm went numb for a fraction of a second, the jab dissipating into nothing. For the first time in 7 months, Izuku had not only successfully defended an attack, but had done so with a perfect, instinctive counter. Shang-Chi stopped, his arm still held in Izuku's grip. He looked down at the point of contact, and then back up at his student. A flicker of genuine surprise, followed by a profound look of pride, crossed his features. He gave a single, slow nod. The silent approval was more powerful than any trophy. In that moment, Izuku felt a surge of confidence that was nothing like the frantic hope he used to cling to. This was different. This was real. This was earned. The final 3 months were about refinement. Izuku's body had transformed. The scrawny, soft boy was gone. In his place was a youth forged of lean, dense muscle and wiry strength. His middle school uniform, once baggy, now fit snugly across his shoulders and back. His hands were callous, his posture was straight, and his movements possessed a quiet, coiled grace. But the biggest change was in his eyes. The frantic, nervous energy was gone. His green eyes were now calm, focused, and observant. He still saw the world in incredible detail, but now he processed it with a serene clarity, not anxious panic. He learned to use the environment. The junkyard beach was no longer a dump, it was a three-dimensional training arena. A discarded pipe became a balancing beam. A stack of tires became a platform for agile leaps. He could traverse the entire length of the beach without touching the sand, a fluid dance of parkour and martial prowess that was breathtaking to behold. Shang-Chi introduced him to the bow staff, teaching him that a weapon was an extension of the self. Understand its spirit, he said. It is not for crushing, but for controlling space, for creating distance, for striking with the speed of a serpent. Izuku, a natural scholar, took to it with fervor, the staff feeling like a natural part of his body within weeks. His notebook was now filled not with hero trivia, but with diagrams of pressure points, notes on breathing techniques, and self-critiques of his own performance in his katas. It had evolved from a book of worship into a journal of mastery. On the morning of the UA entrance exam, 10 months after their first meeting, Izuku stood on the beach as the sun rose. The beach was not entirely clean, that was a task for a fleet of construction vehicles, not a boy and his master. But large swathes of it were now clear, the sand visible for the first time in years. It was a testament to the side effect of their training ground. Shang-Chi stood before him. "Show me." Izuku bowed, then took his starting position. He closed his eyes, took a single, deep breath, and began his kata. It was a form Shang-Chi had taught him called the Dance of the Quirkless Dragon. It was a synthesis of everything he had learned. The solid foundation of the horse stance, the fluid evasiveness of the crane, the explosive strikes of the tiger, the coiling power of the dragon. He moved across the sand, a whirlwind of controlled, elegant violence. His feet barely seemed to touch the ground. His strikes cut through the air with an audible whoosh. It was no longer a sequence of memorized moves. It was an expression of his own spirit. As he moved, he reached inward, to that quiet river Shang-Chi had told him about. He could feel it now, a warm, steady current flowing through him. He focused his will, and for a moment he guided that current into his hands. His palms tingled with a palpable energy, a warmth that seemed to make the air around them shimmer slightly. He ended the kata with a final, open palm strike aimed at the open air, and a small, compressed gust of wind shot forward, kicking up a plume of sand 10 feet away. He held the finishing pose, his breathing even, his body humming with a quiet power. Shang-Chi watched, his expression unreadable but his eyes filled with a deep, resonant pride. "The vessel has been broken. The steel has been forged. You are no longer the boy I met in that alley." He walked forward and placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder. "Today, you will be surrounded by a storm of power. Quirks that can level buildings, that can move at the speed of sound. Do not be intimidated, do not be distracted. They are the storm. You are the mountain. Remember your center. Remember your breath. Show them what a hero forged of will, and not of chance, can do." Izuku met his master's gaze, his own eyes clear and steady. "Yes, master." An hour later, Izuku Midoriya stood before the towering gates of UA High School. He was surrounded by a sea of other hopefuls, a cacophony of nervous chatter and ostentatious displays of quirks. A boy with engine calves rubbed them impatiently. A girl with pink skin bounced on the balls of her feet, and then there was Katsuki Bakugo, his hands shoved in his pockets, a thunderous scowl on his face, tiny sparks popping from his palms. The old Izuku would have been trembling, overwhelmed, a tiny, insignificant boat in an ocean of battleships. He would have been cataloging their quirks, comparing them to his own lack, his anxiety building to a fever pitch. But this Izuku was different. He stood perfectly still amidst the chaos, his yellow backpack slung comfortably over one shoulder. His posture was relaxed but solid. He watched the other students not with envy, but with a calm, analytical eye, noting their unsteady stances, their nervous energy, their over-reliance on the powers they were born with. He closed his eyes and took a deep, centering breath, just as Shang-Chi had taught him. He ignored the noise, the quirks, the crushing weight of expectation. He reached inward, past the fear and the excitement, and found his anchor. He felt the quiet, steady hum of his own chi, a gentle warmth flowing through his veins. It was a river of power that was entirely his. Forged in pain. Honed by discipline. Ready to be unleashed. The great gates of UA began to swing open. Izuku opened his eyes. He was not a hopeful fanboy anymore. He was a martial artist. And he was ready to climb his mountain. The auditorium of UA High was a cavern of hushed anticipation. Hundreds of teenagers, the best and brightest from across the country, sat in tiered rows, each one a bundle of nervous energy. The air was thick with the scent of ozone from an electricity quirk, the faint, sweet smell of someone sweating sugar, and the palpable thrum of anxiety. Izuku Midoriya was an island of calm in the center of that storm. He sat with his back perfectly straight, his hands resting on his knees, his breathing slow and even. He wasn't fidgeting, he wasn't muttering, he wasn't frantically scribbling in a notebook. He was simply present, observing. His senses, honed by months of blindfolded sparring and meditation, took in everything. The subtle shift of weight from the boy next to him, the almost inaudible tap of a girl's claws on the seat in front, the collective intake of breath, as the stage lights flared to life. The old Izuku would have been a supernova of nervous excitement, likely passing out from sheer proximity to his dream. This Izuku, the one forged on the junkyard beach, felt only a quiet, focused resolve. This was not a holy sanctum. It was a proving ground. The pro-hero present mic exploded onto the stage in a riot of sound and leather. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the UA High Entrance Exam. Can I get a yeah? Silence. A cricket could have chirped, and it would have sounded like a gunshot. Izuku allowed a small smile to touch his lips. He remembered reading about present mic's debut. His quirk voice was devastatingly powerful, but his real strength was his charisma. He was a master of controlling a crowd, even a non-responsive one. Present Mike launched into his explanation of the practical exam, a high-energy presentation complete with flashing graphics. The combatants would be robots, designated as 1, 2, or 3 pointers based on their difficulty. The goal was simple: rack up as many points as possible within the time limit. As Present Mike detailed the 3 villain bots, Izuku's mind was already at work. His analytical habit hadn't vanished, it had been refined. It was no longer a compulsive muttering but a silent, efficient tactical assessment. 1-pointers are likely numerous but fragile. Swarm tactics. 2-pointers will be the bread and butter, likely better armored or faster. 3-pointers are the high-risk, high-reward targets, probably heavily armed. Efficiency is key. Engaging the 3s might be a point trap, consuming too much time for a single takedown. Then, a 4th robot appeared on the screen, a colossal silhouette that dwarfed the others. And then there's the 0-pointer. Present Mike bellowed. This guy is more of a stage gimmick. Think of him as an obstacle. He's worth 0 points, so I recommend avoiding him. As Izuku processed this, a sharp, commanding voice cut through the auditorium from a few rows down. Excuse me. I have a question. A tall, broad-shouldered young man with dark blue hair and glasses stood ramrod straight. He moved with a crisp, formal precision. Izuku recognized the uniform of the prestigious Somei Private Academy. On the printout, there are clearly 4 types of villains listed. The boy declared, pointing a rigid hand towards the stage. If this is a misprint, it is a gross error for Japan's most esteemed hero academy. We are all exemplary students here and expect the highest standards. He then pivoted, his hand now pointing directly at Izuku. And you, with the messy green hair. You have been sitting there in a detached, almost disrespectful silence, and I saw you smile moments ago. If you are not taking this seriously, then you should leave this place at once. A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. Heads turned, and dozens of eyes fell upon Izuku. The old Izuku would have imploded. He would have turned beet red, stammered a dozen apologies, and probably burst into tears. This Izuku simply met the boy's intense gaze without flinching. He rose slowly to his feet, not out of intimidation, but out of respect for being addressed. He gave a slight, formal bow from the waist. My apologies, Izuku said, his voice clear and steady, carrying easily through the quieted hall. I was not aware my focus was a distraction. I assure you, I am taking this with the utmost seriousness. I will be more mindful. His response was so calm, so devoid of fear or anger, that it completely disarmed his accuser. The bespectacled boy, who Izuku now recognized as Tenya Ida of the famous Ida hero family, seemed taken aback. He had expected a flustered reaction, not polite, unshakable composure. Ida gave a stiff, jerky nod and sat back down, his face a mask of confusion. Present Mike, unfazed, smoothly answered Ida's question about the 0-pointer, confirming it was an avoidance-based obstacle, and with a final, ear-splitting go beyond. Plus ultra! The presentation was over. As they were herded towards buses that would take them to their designated testing centers, Izuku felt a familiar, oppressive presence behind him. What the hell are you even doing here, Deku? The voice was a low growl, laced with the smell of burnt sugar and nitroglycerin. Izuku didn't need to turn to know it was Katsuki Bakugo. He paused, turning his head slightly to look at his childhood tormentor. Bakugo's red eyes were narrowed in a mixture of contempt and genuine confusion. He couldn't reconcile the trembling, useless Deku he had known his entire life with the calm individual who had just coolly faced down a challenge in front of hundreds of people. The same thing as you, Kaken, Izuku replied, his tone even. I'm here to take the exam. You don't have a quirk, Bakugo snarled, stepping closer, sparks popping in his palms. This is for people who want to be heroes, not for quirkless, useless wannabes playing make-believe. Did you cheat your way in? Are you planning to get yourself killed? Each word was a sharpened stone, thrown with the intent to hurt, to break him down, to force him back into the familiar box of Deku. But the words found no purchase. Izuku's spirit, tempered by 10 months of grueling discipline, was no longer fertile ground for Bakugo's venom. I'm not playing, Izuku said softly, before turning and walking away. Good luck, Kaken. Bakugo was left standing there, sputtering, his anger escalating into full-blown rage. The lack of fear, the lack of a reaction, it was more infuriating to him than any insult. It was as if Deku no longer saw him as a threat, but simply as another person. The testing center was a massive, sprawling cityscape replica. Concrete towers scraped the sky, connected by a labyrinth of streets, alleys, and overpasses. It was a perfect urban combat zone. As Izuku stood before the colossal gates with his assigned group, he performed a series of light stretches, feeling the pleasant looseness in his muscles. He saw the girl from the auditorium entrance, the one with the round, friendly face. She seemed incredibly nervous, wringing her hands together. He was about to offer a word of encouragement when he took a step and his foot caught on an uneven patch of pavement. He stumbled forward. Instantly, his training took over. There was no panicked flailing. His center of gravity dropped, his body coiled, and what would have been a faceplant became a controlled forward roll. He was back on his feet in a fluid motion, dusting off his hands, before he even fully registered what had happened. Whoa, are you okay? The friendly girl was beside him, her hand outstretched, having tapped him on the shoulder just as he recovered. I stopped you with my quirk. I just thought it would be bad luck to fall before we even started. Sorry for using it on you without asking. Izuku looked at his body. He felt weightless. He realized her quirk must be zero gravity. Oh. Thank you, he said, giving her a genuine smile. That was a perfect recovery, but I appreciate the thought. He tapped his fingers together, and the effect of her quirk dissipated. My name is Midoriya. I'm Uraraka Achiko. It's nice to meet you. She chirped, her bubbly energy a stark contrast to his focused calm. This is all so nerve-wracking, isn't it? It is, Izuku agreed. But we've all worked hard to get here. All we can do now is our best. Their conversation was cut short by President Mick's voice booming from unseen speakers. Okay, start. Everyone looked around, confused. What's the matter? There are no countdowns in a real fight. Run! Run! The world exploded into motion. The other applicants surged forward, a tidal wave of quirks and ambition. But Izuku was already gone. The instant the word start hit his ears, his body had reacted. He hadn't waited for confirmation. He had moved. He was a green blur, one of the first through the gates, his legs pumping as he sprinted into the artificial city. He ducked into the first alley he saw, scrambling up a fire escape with practiced, parkour-like efficiency. From the rooftop, he had a vantage point. Below, the street was chaos. A boy with a laser naval quirk was blasting wildly. Bakugo was a whirlwind of explosions, indiscriminately destroying everything in his path. It was powerful, but incredibly inefficient. They're fighting in the open, competing for the same easy targets, Izuku assessed. The deeper I go, the more targets I'll find uncontested. He took a running leap, clearing the gap between buildings with an ease that would have been impossible 10 months ago. He landed in a silent roll, his sneakers barely making a sound on the gravel rooftop. He was a ghost in the machine. He spotted his first target. A one-pointer, a small, wheeled machine with a single red optical sensor, rolled out of an adjacent alley. Izuku dropped from the roof, landing directly behind it. The robot swiveled, its sensor glowing, but it was too late. Izuku's hand, shaped into a rigid spear, shot out and pierced the thin casing around the robot's primary motor. A quick, sharp twist, and the machine sparked, sputtered, and died. 1 point. No wasted energy. He continued deeper into the city. He came upon a pair of two-pointers, more humanoid in shape, with heavy pincer-like arms. They were cornering another applicant, a boy who could apparently pull objects towards him, a quirk utterly useless against 2 tons of approaching steel. "Hey!" Izuku yelled, drawing their attention. The 2 robots turned their glowing red eyes on him. They charged. Izuku held his ground until the last possible second. As the first robot lunged, he dropped into a low slide, sweeping his leg out. It wasn't a normal sweep. He aimed for the robot's ankle joint, a spot he had identified as a primary pivot point. His foot connected with a solid crack. The joint buckled. The robot, all its forward momentum now unbalanced, toppled over with a deafening crash, landing on its companion. Before the second robot could untangle itself, Izuku was on it. He ran up its back, his destination a small maintenance panel between its shoulder blades. He drove the heel of his palm into it. The panel popped open, revealing a mess of wiring. Without hesitation, he reached in and ripped out a thick bundle of cables. The robot's lights flickered and died. 1 + 2 + 2. 5 points. He gave the other applicant a quick nod. "Be careful," he said before melting back into the alleys. The next few minutes were a blur of controlled, precise action. He became a phantom of efficiency. He used his agility to evade, his environment to gain an advantage, and his strikes to disable, not destroy. He saw a 3-pointer, a hulking, tank-like machine, pinning down another group of students with suppressing fire. Instead of engaging it head-on, Izuku scaled the wall of a nearby building, pried loose a heavy piece of concrete debris, and dropped it directly onto the robot's turret cannon. The cannon crumpled, rendering its primary weapon useless. While the robot was disoriented, the other students were able to dismantle it. Izuku didn't wait for thanks. He was already gone, tallying the assist in his head and moving on. He wasn't just fighting, he was dancing. Every action was a continuation of the last. A leap from a wall became a disabling kick. A dodge became an opportunity to get inside a robot's guard. The city was his training ground, the robots his sparring partners. The teachings of Shang-Chi echoed in his mind with every breath. Flow like water. Strike like lightning. Stand like the mountain. He kept a running tally in his head. He was somewhere in the 40s, a solid score, likely enough to pass. But he couldn't let up. He had to prove that his path, his power, was valid. Suddenly, the ground began to tremble. A low, grinding rumble vibrated up through the soles of his shoes. A shadow fell over the street, so vast and so sudden it was like a personal eclipse. Izuku looked up, and his breath caught in his throat. The 0-pointer. It was bigger than he could have ever imagined. A mechanical titan of green and black metal that towered over the tallest buildings in the cityscape. Its single, massive red eye scanned the area, a harbinger of senseless destruction. The street cracked and splintered under its immense weight. The other applicants had only one reaction, pure, unadulterated terror. "It's the 0-pointer. Run! It's not worth any points." A stampede of panicked teenagers fled in the opposite direction, a frantic retreat from the impassive god of steel. Izuku's first instinct was the same. Avoid it. It's an obstacle. Shang-Chi's training was about efficiency, about self-preservation. Engaging this thing was illogical. He turned to run, to follow the crowd and find more point-bearing targets in the final minutes of the exam. And then he heard it. Oof! A small cry of pain, nearly lost in the cacophony of grinding metal and panicked shouts. Izuku's head snapped back towards the mechanical behemoth. There, at its base, was a small figure trapped under a pile of fallen concrete and rebar. Her leg was pinned. It was Uraraka, the friendly girl from the entrance. Her face was pale with fear, her eyes wide as she looked up at the descending shadow of the 0-pointer's massive, building-sized hand. In that instant, 10 months of discipline, of learning to control his impulses, of becoming a mountain of calm, it was all tested against the single, foundational bedrock of his soul, his desperate, unbreakable need to help. The analysis, the logic, the strategy, it all evaporated. The objective was no longer to get points. The objective was right there, trapped and terrified. His body moved. The other students were running away. He ran towards the danger. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror and resolve. All Might's words from that rooftop. "You have to be realistic," screamed in his mind. But they were drowned out by the echo of Shang-Chi's voice. You have the heart of a warrior. He couldn't punch through it. He couldn't smash it. He had to be smarter. He had to be better. He skidded to a halt about 50 feet from the robot's base. He planted his feet, sinking into the familiar, grounding horse stance. He closed his eyes for a single, critical second. The world of chaos fell away. He reached inward, to the quiet river of chi that flowed within him. He took the deepest breath of his life, pulling it down into his belly, his dantian. He wasn't just gathering air, he was gathering his spirit, his will, his power. He opened his eyes. They burned with a focused, emerald intensity. He poured every ounce of his chi into his legs. The muscles in his thighs and calves coiled like overwound springs. Then he exploded upwards. The leap was incredible. It wasn't the flight of All Might, but it was far beyond the capabilities of a normal human. He shot 20 feet into the air, landing solidly on the zero-pointer's massive knee joint. The metal groaned under the impact. He didn't hesitate. He began to run. The robot was a vertical battlefield, a moving skyscraper trying to shake him off. He ran up its leg, his sneakers finding purchase on panels and pistons. A smaller defensive turret popped out from its hip, firing a volley of laser blasts. Izuku didn't stop. He pushed off the wall of the robot's thigh, twisting in midair, the lasers searing the spot where he had been a nanosecond before. He was a flea on the back of a titan. The robot's colossal hand, the one not descending on Uraraka, came swatting at him. He saw it coming, a 5-fingered wall of steel. He leaped, not away, but towards it, landing on the back of the swinging arm. He ran along the length of its forearm, the wind whipping past him, the city a dizzying blur below. He could see his target now. His analytical mind, now working in perfect harmony with his instincts, had spotted it during his ascent. Where the massive arm connected to the torso, there was a complex array of exposed hydraulic pistons and a thick power conduit bundle. It was the shoulder. The source of the arm's movement. If he could disable that, he could stop the hand from crushing Uraraka. He reached the shoulder, planting his feet on the most stable-looking section of plating he could find. The robot bucked, trying to dislodge him. He sank into his stance, becoming an immovable part of the machine. He drew back his right hand not into a fist, but with his palm open, fingers held tightly together. This was it. Everything. Every drop of sweat on the junkyard beach. Every agonizing minute in the horse stance. Every lesson from his master. He channeled all of his remaining chi, focusing it into the center of his palm until it felt like he was holding a miniature sun. This wasn't a crude smash. It was a surgical strike. A technique Shang-Chi had called the quaking palm. Not designed to break the surface, but to send a devastating resonant frequency deep into the target. He slammed his palm against the central hydraulic piston. There was no boom. No flashy explosion. There was only a deep, resonant tchunk that seemed to shake the very soul of the machine. A visible ripple, like a stone dropped in water, spread across the metal surface from the point of impact. A spiderweb of microfractures appeared on the thick piston casing. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deafening shriek of tortured metal, the piston blew. Pressurized hydraulic fluid erupted in a geyser, spraying across the cityscape. The thick power conduit beside it sparked violently, and then went dark. The giant arm, just inches from crushing Uraraka, seized. It froze in place, utterly lifeless. The reactive force of his own blow sent Izuku flying backwards, tumbling off the robot's shoulder. He was falling, 100 feet from the ground. But his training held. There is no failure in the fall, only in not knowing how to land. He twisted his body, aiming for the side of a nearby building. He hit it feet first, absorbing some of the impact, and pushed off, tumbling through the air until he landed on the street below in a jarring but controlled series of rolls that dissipated the lethal force of the impact across his entire body. He came to a stop on one knee, his head bowed, his body screaming in protest. His chi was utterly depleted. Every muscle ached. He was shaking, not from fear, but from sheer, profound exhaustion. A deafeningly loud buzzer echoed through the city, signaling the end of the exam. Silence descended once more, broken only by the hiss of the disabled robot. Izuku pushed himself to his feet, his legs trembling. He saw Uraraka, now free from the rubble, staring at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror, relief, and absolute, unadulterated awe. Other students began to creep out from their hiding places, their faces painted with confusion. Did you see that? What was his quirk? Some kind of vibration power? I don't get it. He just ran up it. The system has him registered as quirkless. The whispers were a buzz of disbelief. Izuku ignored them. He had done it. He had saved someone. He hadn't broken a single bone. A week later, a thick envelope from Ye arrived. Izuku sat at his desk, his mother hovering nervously behind him, Shang-Chi meditating quietly in the corner of his room. He had not seen his master since the morning of the exam, but he had appeared at their door an hour ago, simply stating, "It is time." Izuku opened the envelope. A small metal disc fell out, clattering on his desk. It flickered to life, projecting a hologram of All Might. "I am here as a projection," the hero boomed. Izuku watched, his heart calm. All Might praised his performance on the written exam, and then moved to the practical. "Young Midoriya, your performance was unorthodox, but highly effective. You scored a very respectable 45 villain points." Izuku nodded. "That was a good score. It might be enough, but that's not all," All Might declared, his smile widening. "The UA entrance exam is not just about smashing villains. A true hero saves others from danger. And for that, we award another kind of point, rescue points." A video feed played, showing him leaping into action, disabling robots to save other applicants, and then, the main event, his ascent of the zero-pointer. The judge's commentary could be heard. "Look at that focus. That selfless act, risking his own chances to save another applicant. It's the very definition of heroism. For that single act," All Might's voice boomed with pride, "the judges have awarded you 60 rescue points. For a grand total of 105 points. Placing you first in the entire practical exam." Izuku's eyes widened. First? He had beaten Bakugo. He had beaten everyone. "We hero course teachers were all astounded," All Might continued, his tone shifting to one of genuine curiosity. "We've never seen a power quite like yours, young Midoriya. We look forward to helping you hone it at UA." The camera on the hologram then pulled back slightly, revealing that All Might was not alone in his office. In the background, partially obscured, was Shang-Chi. It seemed he had been invited to consult. The master of martial arts was seated, observing the number one hero. He wasn't looking at All Might. He was looking directly into the camera, as if his gaze could pierce through the projection and see Izuku himself. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He simply, almost imperceptibly, nodded. A single tear traced a path down Izuku's cheek. It wasn't a tear of shock or disbelief. It was a tear of pure, profound, hard-won gratitude. The praise from the symbol of peace was overwhelming, but the silent, simple acknowledgement from his master, that was everything. He stood up and bowed deeply to the hologram, to the two figures who represented the two paths of his new life. "Welcome, young Midoriya," All Might's voice concluded. "This is your hero academia." Izuku straightened up, his eyes shining with a calm, unbreakable fire. His dream wasn't dead. He had just learned to climb the mountain to reach it. The first day at UA High was, for most, an exercise in controlled chaos. For Izuku Midoriya, it was a study in stillness. He sat at his assigned desk in Class 1A, a tempest of vibrant personalities and crackling power swirling around him, and felt a profound sense of peace. The room itself was a monument to heroism, with massive windows that offered a panoramic view of the sprawling campus. It was everything he had ever dreamed of, yet the frantic, star-struck fanba who had wallpapered his bedroom with All Might posters felt like a person from another life. His posture was perfect, a straight line from his tailbone to the crown of his head, a habit ingrained through thousands of hours of meditation and stance training. His breathing was deep and even, an anchor in the churning sea of adolescent energy. He wasn't ignoring his classmates. He was observing them. He saw Tenya Ida, the formal young man from the entrance exam, attempting to enforce a level of decorum that was utterly at odds with the environment, his hands chopping the air with rigid precision. He saw Achiko Uraraka, the girl he had saved, chatting animatedly with a girl who had pink skin and small horns, her personality as bright and buoyant as her quirk. And then there was Katsuki Bakugo. He was a thundercloud in human form, slumped in his chair with his feet kicked up on the desk, a permanent sneer etched onto his face. He kept shooting venomous glares in Izuku's direction, glares that were a complex cocktail of rage, contempt, and something new that Izuku's honed senses could almost taste: confusion. Deep, unsettling confusion. The old Izuku would have flinched, looked away, and started trembling. This Izuku simply met his gaze for a brief moment, offered a neutral, almost imperceptible nod, and then returned his attention to the front of the classroom. The lack of reaction seemed to infuriate Bakugo more than any retort ever could. "Take your feet off that desk," Ida commanded, marching over to Bakugo. "That is school property, desecrated by the upperclassmen who came before us. It is an act of gross disrespect." "Like I care, you four-eyed extra," Bakugo grunted, not even bothering to look at him. "What junior high you from?" The confrontation was a predictable clash of personalities, but Izuku saw more. He saw Bakugo's posture, coiled and ready for a fight, and Ida's, rigid and formal, leaving him open to any number of attacks. It was an unconscious analysis, a new instinct. The classroom door slid open, interrupting the standoff. A figure lay on the floor outside, cocooned in a yellow sleeping bag, looking for all the world like a jaundiced caterpillar. "If you're here to make friends, you can pack up your things now," a tired, monotone voice emanated from the bundle. "This is the hero course." The figure wriggled its way into the classroom, and, with a surprising lack of grace, stood up and unzipped the sleeping bag. He was a man with long, unkempt black hair, dark, tired eyes, and a scarf that looked like it was made of thick bandages wrapped around his neck. He took a long, slow sip from a juice pouch. "It took you all 8 seconds to quiet down," he said, his voice a gravelly drawl. "Life is short. You're all lacking in common sense." He scanned the room, his gaze lingering for a fraction of a second longer on Izuku before moving on. "I'm your homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa. Pleased to meet you." The collective shock of the class was a palpable wave. This disheveled, exhausted-looking man was a pro-hero? "Right, let's get to it," Aizawa said, pulling a blue UA gym uniform from his sleeping bag. "Put these on and meet me on the P grounds." The P grounds were vast and sun-drenched. The students of Class 1A stood in a loose, nervous group, clad in their new uniforms. Izuku felt the familiar texture of the fabric, a comfortable weight against his skin. He fell into a light stretching routine, loosening his hamstrings and shoulders, his movements fluid and economical. "A quirk apprehension test?" the class exclaimed in unison. Aizawa held up a small device. "You've been taking standardized tests your whole lives, but you've never been allowed to use your quirks in physical exams. The ministry is full of bureaucrats who refuse to modernize. It's not rational." He tossed a softball to Bakugo. "Bakugo, you finished first in the practical exam. What was your best softball throw in junior high?" 67 meters, Bakugo grunted. "Try it with your quirk," Aizawa said, gesturing to a large white circle on the ground. "Do whatever you need to, just stay in the circle." Bakugo stepped into the circle, a wicked grin spreading across his face. He stretched his arm, and then with a guttural roar of "die," he hurled the ball. The throw was propelled by a massive, concussive explosion that ripped through the air. The ball became a comet, soaring high into the sky and disappearing from sight. Aizawa looked at the device in his hand. A moment later it beeped. He held it up for the class to see. 705.2 meters. The class erupted. 705 meters? Seriously? This looks like fun. We can use our quirks as much as we want. Awesome. Aizawa's expression soured, a shadow falling over his face. Fun? You think this is fun? His eyes began to glow a faint, menacing red, his hair levitating slightly. You have 3 years here to become a hero. You think it's all going to be fun and games? Idiots. The mood plummeted. The air grew cold. Today, you will compete in 8 physical tests to gauge your potential, Aizawa continued, his voice now laced with a chilling seriousness. Whoever comes in last place will be judged to have no potential, and will be expelled immediately. Panic gripped the class. Expulsion? On the first day? This wasn't a game. This was a culling. This is Yue, Aizawa said, a cruel smile playing on his lips. Welcome to the hero course. Izuku felt a flicker of the old, familiar anxiety. Expulsion. His dream, earned through blood and sweat, could be snatched away in a single afternoon. But then, he felt the solid ground beneath his feet. He took a deep, centering breath, just as Shang-Chi had taught him. The storm rages, but the mountain does not move. His panic subsided, replaced by a razor-sharp focus. This wasn't a threat, it was a challenge. And he had been training for nothing but challenges for the last 10 months. Test 1, 50-meter dash. Izuku was paired against Ida. It was a deliberate choice by Aizawa, Izuku suspected. The quirkless versus the high-spec engine. Runners on your mark, a robotic voice announced. Izuku sank into a sprinter's starting crouch. It wasn't the standard form. It was lower, more coiled, a technique Shang-Chi had taught him for explosive forward momentum, derived from a tiger's pounce. He wasn't thinking about winning. He was thinking about form. Get set. He could hear the low hum and rumble of the engines in Ida's calves firing up. Go! Ida was a blur. He shot off the line like a bullet, crossing the 50 meters in 3.04 seconds. But Izuku wasn't far behind. His explosion from the blocks was biomechanically perfect. He didn't have engines, but he had a body where every single muscle fiber fired in perfect sequence. His arms pumped, his legs devoured the track, his form a study in human efficiency. He crossed the line in 5.58 seconds. It was fast. Incredibly fast for a normal human, but in this superpowered arena, it was merely above average. 5.58 seconds, the robot chirped. Ida adjusted his glasses, looking at Izuku with a new respect. An excellent time, Midoriya. Your starting form is flawless. Thank you, Ida. Your speed is incredible, Izuku replied genuinely. Aizawa watched from the side, making a note on his data pad. Quirk status, none. Result, peak human. Interesting. Test 2, grip strength. Izuku took the dynamometer. He gripped it, focusing not on raw, crushing force, but on the kinetic chain Shang-Chi had drilled into him. He squeezed, the power flowing from his feet, through his core, and into his hand. The device beeped, 85 kilograms. A very strong, well-trained result. But then he watched a massive, six-armed student named Shoji step up and shatter the device with a grip that registered over 540 kilograms. Izuku didn't feel discouraged. He felt grounded. He knew his limits. He wasn't here to be the strongest. He was here to be the most skilled. Tests 3, 4, 5, and 6, standing long jump, repeated side steps, sit-ups, seated toe touch. These were Izuku's domain. In the long jump, he cleared the entire sandbox, his explosive leg strength earning him murmurs of surprise. In the side steps, his agility and balance were second to none. He was a green blur, his feet barely seeming to touch the ground. The sit-ups and flexibility tests were trivial, his core strength and limberness honed by countless hours of forms and conditioning. The whispers started to grow louder among his classmates. Wait, I thought he was quirkless? There's no way. Did you see that jump? Maybe he has a subtle reinforcement quirk? Bakugo watched every test, his scowl deepening with each impressive result. This wasn't the Deku he knew. The Deku he knew was a weak, clumsy pebble he could kick around at will. This person was something else. Something he didn't understand. And it was driving him insane. Test 7, the ball throw. This was the main event. This was the test of explosive, raw power. Uraraka stepped up first. With a light touch, she activated her quirk on the ball and threw it. It sailed upwards, and upwards, and upwards, never coming down. Aizawa's device beeped, displaying a single, sideways figure 8. Infinity. The class was in awe. Infinity? This was the standard. This was the level of power he was up against. Finally, it was Izuku's turn. He walked into the circle, the last student to go. All eyes were on him. The whispers had reached a fever pitch. He was the great mystery of Class 1A, the quirkless kid who wasn't weak. He took the softball. It felt light, insignificant in his calloused hand. He could hear Bakugo muttering under his breath, "Get ready for a big fat nothing, you damn faker." Izuku ignored him. He ignored everyone. He walked to the center of the circle and planted his feet, sinking into the deep, unshakable foundation of the horse stance, Mabu. The world around him seemed to fade away. The jeers, the whispers, the expectant stares, they were just noise. There was only the circle, the ball, and his own center. He closed his eyes. He took a single, deep breath, pulling the air not into his chest, but deep into his abdomen, his dantian. He reached inward, to the quiet, warm river of his chi. For 10 months he had practiced this, guiding it, nurturing it, feeling its flow. He had only ever used it for small things, a focused strike, an enhanced sense, a small gust of wind. He had never tried to channel so much of it into a single, explosive action. The arm is a conduit, Shang-Chi's voice echoed in his memory. The power comes from the earth. He could feel it now. A tingling warmth starting in the soles of his feet, a connection to the very ground he stood on. He drew that energy up, a current of silent power flowing through his perfectly aligned bones and muscles. It spiraled up his legs, coiled in his hips, surged up his spine, and pooled in his right shoulder, waiting. His whole body hummed with a contained, vibrant energy. The air around him seemed to shimmer, though it was a sensation only he could feel. He opened his eyes. They were no longer the wide, emotional eyes of a boy. They were the focused, piercing green eyes of a martial artist. He began to move. It wasn't a wild, powerful wind-up like Bakugo's. It was a slow, deliberate, and beautiful motion. He twisted his hips, his body uncoiling like a striking cobra. His arm whipped forward, a perfect arc of kinetic energy. The movement was so fluid, so technically perfect, it looked like something from a textbook on physics. At the very last moment, as his fingers were about to release the ball, he let out a sharp, explosive shout from his diaphragm. Hiya! It was a ki, a spirit yell. The sound itself seemed to have physical force, a focused shockwave of sound. The chi he had gathered surged from his shoulder, down his arm, and into the ball, all in the instant of its release. The ball didn't explode off his hand like Bakugo's. It flew. It shot forward with an unnatural velocity, a white blur against the blue sky. It didn't have the same majestic, high arc as the others. It was a flat, powerful trajectory, like a cannonball, cutting through the air with a faint, high-pitched whistle. It soared past the 50-meter mark, the 100-meter mark, past where most of the class had landed their throws. It kept going, and going, and going, finally landing with a distant thump far down the field. The entire class was silent. Stunned, Aizawa stared at the device in his hand, his perpetually bored expression completely gone. His eyes were wide, the dark pupils constricted as he tried to process what he had just seen. He looked from the number on the screen to Izuku, who was now calmly walking out of the circle, his breathing already back to normal. What? Kaminari, the electric boy, stammered. What was that? How far? Uraraka whispered, her eyes wide with awe. Aizawa slowly turned the device around. The screen read, 705.3 meters. A collective gasp went through the class. It was 1/10 of a meter farther than Bakugo. The silence was shattered by a roar of pure, unadulterated fury. DKU! Bakugo launched himself forward, his hands already crackling with explosions. You bastard! What the hell was that? You've been hiding a quirk from me all this time, you shitty nerd! Tell me how you did that or you're dead! He was a blur of rage, aimed directly at Izuku. But Izuku didn't flinch. He didn't even look scared. His body shifted almost imperceptibly, his weight sinking, his hands rising into a defensive posture. He saw Bakugo's trajectory, the slight overcommitment in his right shoulder, the instability in his footing. He was already preparing a simple, elegant redirection that would use Bakugo's own momentum to send him sprawling harmlessly onto the dirt. He never got the chance. In a flash, the scarf around Aizawa's neck shot out, wrapping around Bakugo's body with the speed and strength of steel cables. Bakugo was frozen in place, his explosions sputtering and dying instantly. What the? These cloths are hard. Bakugo struggled, his quirk completely neutralized. They're a carbon fiber capture weapon alloyed with a special metal wire, Aizawa said, his eyes now glowing a terrifying, bright red. And I'd appreciate it if you'd stop forcing me to use my quirk. It gives me serious dry eye. He released Bakugo, who stumbled forward, panting with rage. Aizawa stepped between the two boys, his gaze fixed on Bakugo. "Stand down," Aizawa commanded, his voice lethally quiet. "Your tantrums are illogical and a waste of everyone's time. You have potential, Bakugo. But if you can't control yourself, you'll never be more than a talented thug. Now get back in line." Bakugo stared, his chest heaving, his pride and his rage warring with the undeniable authority of his teacher. With a final, hate-filled glare at Izuku, he turned and stomped back to the group, his fists clenching and unclenching. Aizawa then turned his full attention to Izuku. The intense red glow faded from his eyes. He walked closer, his gaze analytical, searching. "The school registry has you listed as quirkless, Midoriya," Aizawa stated, his voice low. "That is correct, sir," Izuku replied, his posture respectful but his gaze unwavering. 705.3 meters is not a quirkless score, Aizawa countered. "It is, by all metrics, an impossible score for someone without a strength-enhancing quirk." "Explain it." Izuku took a breath. He had discussed this with Shang-Chi. The truth was too complex, too esoteric for a simple explanation. So he would give the only answer he could. "I have been undergoing a specialized, intensive physical conditioning regime for the past 10 months, Sensei," Izuku said calmly. "It focuses on perfect biomechanics, breath control, and the complete utilization of the body's kinetic potential. What you saw was the result of that training. It was the truth, but it was a truth that explained nothing and everything all at once." Aizawa stared at him for a long, silent moment. He saw no deception in the boy's eyes. Only a quiet, unshakable conviction. He knew the boy was holding something back, but it wasn't a lie. It was something else. Something new. The word quirkless was a label, a box. And this boy, Izuku Midoriya, did not fit in that box. A flicker of something that might have been a smile, or perhaps just a twitch, crossed Aizawa's tired face. "A specialized conditioning regime," he repeated slowly. He nodded to himself. "Right. Don't let it go to your head." He turned back to the class. "All right, the demonstration is over. Let's finish the last test and get your results." Test 8, Distance Run. This was an endurance test. Many students who had exhausted their quirks in the earlier tests began to flag. Izuku, however, just ran. He fell into a steady, rhythmic pace, his breathing controlled, his form perfect. He didn't come in first. Ida's engines were too much for long distance. But he finished in the top 5, not even breathing heavily, his recovery almost instantaneous. Finally it was over. The class gathered, a mess of sweat, exhaustion, and anxiety. Aizawa stood before them, a holographic scoreboard appearing in the air beside him. "Time to see the results," he said, his voice flat. "The total scores are simply a reflection of your performance in each test. I've ranked you from top to bottom." Izuku scanned the list, his heart beating a steady rhythm in his chest. His name, Izuku Midoriya, was not at the top. It was not at the bottom. It was solidly in the middle, 10th place. He hadn't excelled in the raw power metrics, but his stellar performance in the tests of skill, agility, and technique had balanced his scores perfectly. He hadn't just avoided last place. He had proven he belonged. He looked for the bottom of the list. The last name was Minoru Mineta, a short boy with purple balls for hair, who was currently sobbing on the ground. "And by the way," Aizawa said, his voice dripping with casual cruelty as he dismissed the hologram, "I was lying about the expulsion." The class froze. "It was a rational deception," he continued with a wide, unnerving grin, "to make you draw out your full potential." The ensuing uproar of betrayal and relief was deafening. Izuku, however, simply let out a slow, controlled breath. He had suspected as much. A teacher who valued potential wouldn't discard it so easily on the first day. It had been a test within a test. A test of character. As the students began to head back to the locker rooms, a voice called out to him. "Midoriya!" It was Aizawa. The other students gave them a wide berth. "Sir?" Izuku asked, turning to face him. Aizawa's expression was back to its usual tired apathy, but his eyes were sharp, focused. "That conditioning regime of yours. It's given you a solid foundation. You have good instincts, perfect body control, and a calm head under pressure. That's more than I can say for 90% of the hotshots in your class. He took a step closer. But don't get complacent. Out there, he gestured to the world beyond UA's walls, villains won't wait for you to get into a perfect stance. Raw power, the kind you lack, can end a fight before it begins. You're starting from a different place than everyone else. It's not a disadvantage, but it is a reality. You'll have to work harder, be smarter, and be more creative than any of them if you want to survive. He looked Izuku dead in the eye. You've got potential, kid. Don't waste it. It was not a compliment filled with booming pride like All Might's. It was a simple, logical assessment from a man who had seen everything and was impressed by nothing. And for that reason, it meant the world. It was a validation earned not by a gift, but by 10 months of sweat, pain, and unwavering will. I won't, Sensei, Izuku said, bowing deeply. Thank you. Aizawa grunted and walked away, his capture weapon scarf trailing behind him like a weary shadow. Izuku stood alone on the field for a moment longer. He looked down at his hands. They were aching from the grip test, his muscles were burning from the run, and his palms still tingled from the chi he had channeled. He had been tested. He had been measured. And he had not been found wanting. He was a student of UA High Class 1A. He had earned it. And this, he knew with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, was only the beginning. The next day, the atmosphere in Class 1A was a volatile cocktail of nervous energy and burgeoning rivalries. Aizawa's quirk apprehension test had been a brutal but effective icebreaker, shattering preconceived notions and forging the first tentative bonds of shared hardship. Yet, for all the chatter, a palpable tension radiated from one corner of the room, a localized storm system named Katsuki Bakugo. He sat in stony silence, his crimson eyes fixed on the back of Izuku Midoriya's head, the air around him practically vibrating with repressed fury. Izuku, for his part, was a portrait of serenity. He was aware of the burning gaze, could feel the animosity like a physical pressure, but he did not let it penetrate his calm. He was focused on the front of the classroom, waiting for the day's lesson to begin. He had learned from Shang-Chi that to allow another's anger to dictate your own emotional state was to grant them a victory before the first blow was ever struck. The morning was filled with standard, surprisingly mundane, academic classes. English with present mic was loud, modern literature with Cementos was dry, and mathematics with ectoplasm was, well, it was math. It was during the lunch rush in the cafeteria that Izuku truly felt the shift in his social standing. Ida and Uraraka approached his table, their trays laden with food. Midoriya, may we join you? Ida asked, his movements as precise as ever. Of course, Izuku replied with a welcoming smile. Deku! Uraraka chirped, using the nickname she had overheard Bakugo screaming the day before. She seemed oblivious to its venomous origins. Your ball throw yesterday was insane. I thought you were going to blast a hole through the sky. I still don't get your quirk. Is it like a super strength thing? Izuku paused, his chopsticks hovering over a piece of fish. Before he could formulate a response, Ida interjected. While your physical prowess is undeniable, Midoriya, I must admit I am also perplexed, he said, adjusting his glasses. Aizawa-sensei acknowledged your quirkless status, yet your performance exceeded that of many students with enhancement-type quirks. It is a logical paradox I am eager to unravel. Izuku offered a small, apologetic smile. It's complicated. It's not a quirk. It's just training. A very specific and very difficult kind of training. The answer was unsatisfactory, but it was the only one he could give. Before they could press further, a booming, familiar voice echoed through the cafeteria. I am here. Walking through the door like a normal person, All Might, in his shimmering silver-aged costume, struck a dramatic pose in the doorway to the classroom. The entire class, including Izuku, was starstruck. The sheer presence of the number one hero was overwhelming. He was a living legend, a walking sun radiating hope and power. The old Izuku would have been a puddle of tears and frantic muttering. This Izuku felt a deep, profound respect, but his feet remained firmly planted on the ground. He had met the man behind the smile, and he had found a new source of strength in himself. He could admire the sun without being blinded by it. Welcome to the most important class at UA High. All Might announced, his smile never wavering. Hero Basic Training. For today's lesson, we'll be jumping right in with combat training. He gestured to the wall, where numbered cases slid out with a pneumatic hiss. And to go with it are these costumes designed based on your quirk registration forms and requests. The class erupted in a fever of excitement. They were going to fight. And they were going to do it in their own, personalized hero costumes. In the changing rooms, Izuku opened his case, number 17. Inside was the costume he had designed, a creation born from the mind of a hero-worshipping fanboy, but with practical considerations he had added after his training with Shang-Chi. It was a simple, full-body jumpsuit of a sturdy, dark green material, with white accents and a red belt. The most notable features were the metal-soled boots for better grip and kicking power, reinforced elbow and knee pads, and a full-face mask with long, ear-like protrusions and a grinning respirator. The ears were in homage to All Might's iconic hairstyle, a lingering piece of his old self. The grin was a promise of the hero he wanted to be, but as he pulled on the fabric, he noted the changes Shang-Chi had suggested. The material was lighter, more flexible around the joints. The gloves were fingerless, allowing for more precise hand strikes and grips. The boots were sturdy but not overly heavy, designed for agility as much as for impact. It was a costume that spoke to his new identity, a blend of heroic idealism and pragmatic martial discipline. When Class 1A emerged into the artificial cityscape of Ground Beta, it was a dazzling array of color and design. Each costume was a unique expression of the student's power and personality. Uraraka looked sleek and cute in her pink and black spacesuit-themed outfit. Ida was like a medieval knight crossed with a race car, covered in sleek white armor with engine exhausts protruding from his back. And then there was Bakugo. His costume was pure, unadulterated aggression. A black, sleeveless top, baggy pants, and massive, grenade-shaped gauntlets on his forearms. He looked less like a hero in training and more like a walking weapon of mass destruction. His eyes immediately found Izuku's, and the sneer on his face deepened. The ridiculous, rabbit-like mask only seemed to fuel his contempt. Now that you're all ready, it's time to begin, All Might announced, pulling a script from his belt. For this exercise, we'll be splitting into teams of 2. You'll be randomly assigned to face off as either heroes or villains. The scenario is this. The villains have hidden a nuclear weapon somewhere in this building. The heroes must either capture the villains or secure the weapon within the time limit. The villains win by either capturing the heroes or protecting the weapon until time runs out. It was a classic, high-stakes scenario. Izuku's mind immediately began dissecting the tactical possibilities. Indoor combat heavily favors defenders. Choke points, ambushes, environmental control. Heroes are on a clock, forcing them to be aggressive. Villains can afford to be patient. Let's draw for our teams, All Might declared, holding up a lottery box. One by one, the students drew their lots. Izuku watched as Bakugo was paired with Ida. An explosive powerhouse and a high-speed tactician. A formidable team. Then Uraraka drew her lot. Team A. Izuku stepped forward and drew his own. Team A. He would be partnered with Uraraka. A warmth spread through his chest. She was earnest and her quirk, while not overtly destructive, had immense strategic potential. Then, All Might announced the first matchup. The first teams to fight will be these guys. He boomed, pulling 2 balls from 2 boxes labeled hero and villain. Team A will be the heroes. And Team D will be the villains. A cold dread, the first he had felt all day, settled in Izuku's stomach. Team D. The team of Katsuki Bakugo and Tenya Ida. The universe, it seemed, had a cruel sense of irony. It was inevitable. The confrontation that had been simmering for a decade was about to boil over. In the monitor room, the rest of Class 1A watched the screens, their faces a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Who do you think will win? Asked Kirishima, a boy with spiky red hair. Bakugo is a beast, man, Kaminari replied. And Ida's super fast. The hero team doesn't stand a chance. But Midoriya was amazing in the apprehension test, pointed out Tsuyu Azuri, a frog-like girl. And Uraraka's quirk is tricky. It could be a close fight, Ribbit. All Might stood before the monitors, his signature smile fixed in place, but his mind was troubled. He had orchestrated this pairing. He needed to see. He needed to understand the true nature of young Midoriya's power, and he knew that the only one who could push him to his absolute limit was young Bakugo. He just hoped he hadn't made a terrible mistake. Inside the building, a 5-story concrete monolith, Izuku and Uraraka stood outside, clutching a floor plan of the building. Izuku was not looking at the map. He had already memorized it. He was looking at Uraraka. Her usual bubbly demeanor was gone, replaced by a tense, nervous energy. "This is pretty intense, huh?" she said, her voice a little shaky. "We're up against Bakugo and Ida. I'm kinda scared." Izuku placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's okay to be scared. But we have a plan. And we have each other. That makes us strong." "A plan?" she asked, her eyes wide. "A simple one," Izuku said, his voice dropping to a low, confident tone. "I know Kaken." He used the old nickname, not out of affection, but as a tactical designation. "He's not a team player. He's a hunter. He won't be guarding the objective. He'll come for me. His pride won't let him do anything else. He sees me as a personal insult that needs to be erased." He pointed to the 5th floor on the map. "Ida is logical and follows rules. He will be the one guarding the weapon. He will almost certainly have cleared the room of any debris to maximize his high-speed movement. That makes him predictable." He looked Uraraka directly in the eyes, his own gaze steady and clear through the lenses of his mask. "So, this is the plan. We enter together. Kaken will find us. When he does, I will engage him. I will keep him busy. Your job, Uraraka, is the most important. You must use the distraction I create to get past him and make your way to the 5th floor. Avoid Ida if you can. Your goal is the weapon. Can you do that?" Uraraka stared at him, her nervousness melting away, replaced by a look of steely determination. He wasn't treating her as a sidekick, or as someone who needed protection. He was treating her as an equal, a partner with a critical role. He was entrusting the victory to her. "Yeah," she said, her voice firm. "I can do that." "Good," Izuku replied. He pressed the small earpiece All Might had given them. "We'll stay in contact. Be smart. Be safe. And remember your training." "All right, hero team. You may begin." All Might's voice crackled in their ears. Izuku pushed the heavy door open and they slipped inside, the darkness of the building swallowing them whole. The interior was a maze of gray corridors and empty rooms. They moved in perfect silence, Izuku in the lead, his body low to the ground, his senses on high alert. He wasn't just listening for footsteps. He was feeling for vibrations in the floor, for the subtle shifts in air pressure that would betray a hidden presence. They had just reached the 2nd floor landing when it happened. A flash of orange light, a deafening roar, and the wall to their right exploded inward. A figure shot through the cloud of dust and debris like a cannonball. It was Bakugo. His face was a mask of pure, murderous glee, his right hand outstretched, palms sizzling. "Found you, you damn nerd!" he screamed. The attack was aimed directly at Izuku's head. It was a sneak attack, brutal and potentially lethal, but Izuku was already moving. His body reacted before his mind had time to form a conscious thought. He had felt the shift in air pressure an instant before the explosion. He pushed Uraraka hard to the side, yelling "Go!" "Now!" As he dropped and twisted, Bakugo's explosive right hook seared the air where Izuku's head had been. Izuku didn't retreat. He flowed forward, under the attack. He spun on his heel, his left leg sweeping out and a low arc aimed at Bakugo's supporting leg. Bakugo, surprised by the speed and nature of the counter, was forced to hop back, his follow-up attack spoiled. He landed, snarling. "Not bad for a worthless pebble," he spat. "But you're still just a bug who's learned to dodge. Uraraka, stick to the plan." Izuku shouted into his comms, never taking his eyes off Bakugo. "All right." Her voice came back, distant and shaken. He heard her footsteps scrambling away, up the stairs. Bakugo started to move after her, but Izuku shifted, placing himself directly in his path. "She's not your opponent, Kaken," Izuku said, his voice calm and steady, a stark contrast to the raging inferno before him. "I am." Bakugo's eyes narrowed into slits. "You think you can even be my opponent? Don't make me laugh, Deku." He blasted forward again, this time leading with a series of smaller, rapid-fire explosions, like a machine gun. This was the core of the chapter, the moment of truth. The tiger versus the dragon. Bakugo was the tiger, all power, aggression, and unrestrained ferocity. Izuku was the dragon, fluid, evasive, and filled with a hidden, coiled strength. Izuku did not block. Shang-Chi had taught him that blocking raw concussive force like Bakugo's was a fool's errand. It was like trying to stop a tidal wave with a wooden shield. You don't stop the wave, you flow with it. You dive under it. You become part of its motion. He moved with an almost supernatural grace. He used techniques reminiscent of Zhang and Aikido, circular, evasive movements that allowed him to flow around Bakugo's explosive attacks. He didn't just dodge. He used the concussive force of the blasts themselves. A near miss to his left became a propellant, pushing him to the right. An explosion at his feet became a launch pad for a high, twisting leap. He was a green leaf caught in a hurricane, yet he was never torn apart. "Stand still and fight me, you coward!" Bakugo roared, his frustration mounting with every missed attack. In the monitor room, the students were speechless. "What is happening?" Kirishima breathed. "Bakugo can't even touch him. It's like he knows where Bakugo is going to attack before he does," Momo Yayorozu, a girl with a creation quirk, observed, her analytical mind working furiously. "His threat assessment and spatial awareness are off the charts." All Might watched, his fists clenched, a bead of sweat tracing a path down his temple. This wasn't the raw, self-destructive power he had feared young Midoriya might one day wield. This was something else entirely. It was art. Back in the corridor, Izuku wasn't just defending. He was attacking. Not Bakugo's body, but his mind. His confidence. "Your reliance on your right hook is a liability, Kaken," Izuku said, his voice even as he slipped under another wide, angry swing. "It's powerful, but it leaves your entire left side exposed for a full 1.2 seconds. Shut up!" Bakugo screamed, launching a left-handed blast, trying to prove him wrong. "Your left is faster, but less controlled," Izuku continued, effortlessly redirecting the blast with a reinforced gauntlet, the force harmlessly scorching the ceiling. "You can't fine-tune the explosive output as well. Your footing is also unstable after a large blast. You're sacrificing your foundation for a momentary burst of power." Every observation was a perfectly placed needle, puncturing Bakugo's ego. He was taking Bakugo's greatest strength, his overwhelming power, and systematically deconstructing it, exposing the flaws within. He was doing to Bakugo in combat what he used to do to heroes in his notebooks. But now his analysis was a weapon. Bakugo, pushed to the edge of his reason, let out a primal scream of pure frustration. "I'll show you a momentary burst of power." He raised his massive grenade-like gauntlet, aiming it at Izuku. "You know what these are for, Deku? My quirk produces sweat that's like nitroglycerin. I've been storing it up in these gauntlets all fight." In the monitor room, All Might's blood ran cold. "Bakugo, my boy, don't do it! You'll kill him!" he yelled into the comms. "He won't die if he dodges." Bakugo screamed back, his finger hovering over the pin. His face was a twisted mask of rage and desperation. He couldn't understand. Why wasn't Deku afraid? Why wasn't he cowering? Why was he standing there, like he was Bakugo's equal? It was a blasphemy he had to correct. "Kaken, don't," Izuku said, his calm finally breaking, a flicker of genuine fear in his eyes. "Smile for the camera, DKU." He pulled the pin. A torrent of blinding light and devastating force erupted from the gauntlet. It was not a simple explosion. It was a focused, shaped charge, a concentrated beam of pure destructive energy that tore a massive hole through the building, annihilating everything in its path. Izuku had already moved. The instant Bakugo's muscles tensed to pull the pin, he had thrown himself into a desperate dive behind a thick concrete support pillar. The heat washed over him, searing and intense. The shockwaves slammed into him, knocking the wind from his lungs and sending him tumbling across the floor. The dust settled, revealing a scene of absolute devastation. A huge section of the building had simply been vaporized. Bakugo stood panting, his arms smoking, a wild, triumphant look in his eyes. He had won. He had proven his superiority. But then, a figure slowly, painfully, pushed himself up from behind the half-destroyed pillar. Izuku was alive. His costume was torn and scorched. A thin trickle of blood ran from a cut on his forehead, his mask having been ripped from his face. He was battered, bruised, and breathing heavily. But he was standing. "Are you trying to kill me, Kaken?" Izuku asked, his voice low and trembling, not with fear, but with a cold, righteous anger. Bakugo's triumphant grin faltered. He had used his ultimate move. A move he thought was powerful enough to rival All Might himself. And Deku was still standing. The fear he had wanted to see in Izuku's eyes was now beginning to bloom in his own chest. "Now I'm angry," Izuku whispered. He took a single, deep breath, and his trembling stopped. He settled back into his stance, the calm returning to him like a shroud. But this was a different kind of calm. It was not the calm of a peaceful lake. It was the calm at the eye of a hurricane. "You've had your turn," Izuku said. "Now it's mine." He moved. He was a green streak, faster than he had been before. He closed the distance in an instant. Bakugo, overconfident and his arms still recovering from the recoil, reacted a split second too late. Izuku was inside his guard. Too close for Bakugo to use any large-scale explosions without injuring himself. The counterattack was not a single, powerful blow. It was a flurry, a storm of precise, targeted strikes. A technique Shang called the Thousand Ripples. Thwack. A knife hand to the pressure point on Bakugo's right bicep, causing the muscle to seize. Thump. The heel of his palm into Bakugo's solar plexus, forcing the air from his lungs in a sharp gasp. Crack. A sharp, upward kick to the inside of Bakugo's knee, not to break it, but to destabilize his stance. Tap. 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 3 rapid finger jabs to the nerve clusters in Bakugo's shoulder and neck, sending jolts of paralyzing pain through his system. Bakugo tried to fight back, to throw a punch, to create an explosion, but his body wouldn't obey. His arms felt heavy, his legs weak. Every time he tried to move, another one of Izuku's precise, debilitating strikes would land, short-circuiting his nervous system. It was like being dismantled piece by piece. He was being utterly and completely outclassed. Not by power, but by a level of skill so far beyond his comprehension it felt like magic. Izuku saw his final opening. Bakugo, disoriented and desperate, lunged forward for a clumsy tackle. Izuku sidestepped, his hand grabbing the back of Bakugo's head, his other arm hooking under Bakugo's armpit. He pivoted on his heel, using Bakugo's own forward momentum against him. It was a classic, perfectly executed shoulder throw. Bakugo was airborne for a moment, a look of pure, unadulterated shock on his face, before he crashed onto the concrete floor with a sickening thud that knocked the last of the air from his lungs. At the exact same moment, Uraraka's voice crackled through Izuku's earpiece, triumphant and breathless. "I got it, Deku-kun. I secured the weapon. Hero Team Yins." All Might's voice boomed through the building's speakers. Izuku stood over the defeated, gasping form of Katsuki Bakugo. He was not triumphant. He was not gloating. He simply stood there, his chest rising and falling, the adrenaline slowly beginning to recede. He looked down at the boy who had tormented him for a decade, the boy who had represented everything he could never be, and he felt a profound sense of melancholy. The battle was over. The war of their childhood was, in that moment, finally finished. He extended a hand down to his fallen rival. "It's over, Kaken." Bakugo slapped his hand away, pushing himself up onto his elbows, his body trembling with a mixture of pain, exhaustion, and a soul-crushing humiliation he had never before experienced. He looked at Izuku, at the calm, pitying expression on his face, and for the first time in his life, Katsuki Bakugo was utterly, completely, and devastatingly defeated. In the monitor room, there was absolute silence. Every student, every future hero, stared at the screen in stunned disbelief. The prodigy of their class, the boy with the perfect quirk and the perfect record, had just been systematically taken apart by the quiet, quirkless kid. They hadn't just witnessed a school exercise. They had witnessed the birth of a legend.